Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna discuss about algae. So here's an update on the Seramis growing medium. It's going quite okay for most of my orchids. They seem to adapt to it and love it. However, one of the questions addressed to me was, is it prone to creating algae? Well, as you can see, it kinda is, because it does tend to stay quite moist. However, not all of my orchids have algae, and it's not necessarily the orchids that stay more moist that have algae. No, what happens is the orchids that had older roots with some algae deposits on them promoted algae appearance on the surface of the Seramis. So here I have two examples with no algae at all. This is a paphiopedilum, and of course the roots are inside the medium. They are not prone to having algae because algae need light to develop, and of course all the roots of a paphiopedilum are inside the pot. The pot is not transparent, thus I don't have issues. And here's another cattleya. This one did not have any roots when I brought it here, or it just had a few roots started, and I don't have algae issues on the top of my Seramis, simply because there was nothing there to start a culture. However, this guy, hopefully you can see, I had a few algae on the older roots, and what they did was plant the seeds for algae, and because algae had an appropriate medium to develop, they developed and they look kind of unsightly. Now, algae don't necessarily pose a threat to orchids. However, if you leave them unattended, if you let them become too much, they can be detrimental. So today we're going to try to get rid of them by not replacing medium, but by using hydrogen peroxide. So let's see what's going to happen. So I have here some hydrogen peroxide, 3% on this bottle. 3% concentration usually does not affect roots. I never experienced any damage, so it should be perfectly fine to spray on top of the medium, even if hydrogen peroxide will seep down into the medium. So let's see, theoretically, algae should be affected by hydrogen peroxide. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to spray the top. Oops. Oh, already they're moving out of their place. And you can hear them fizz, and you can actually see them fizzing away, boiling away. They're not boiling. However, hydrogen peroxide does work against algae. So what I'm gonna do is let it fizz like this for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna try to rinse the pot. Wow, they're coming off. Wow, did you see that? Okay, I think we're onto something here. Okay, I'm just gonna leave them fizz away, leave the hydrogen peroxide do its thing, and then we'll come back and try to rinse the pot. Okay, we're back. There's no more audible fizzing, so let's just rinse this orchid under the faucet and see what we're left with. Ooh, the water is kind of green, and I discovered I have quite a lot of algae on the bottom as well. So that needs to be cleaned as well. Ooh, there we go. It's a clear improvement, isn't it? So yeah, I can safely conclude that hydrogen peroxide does help with algae. Will I have another algae outbreak? Yeah, indeed I will, because there are still algae on the roots that will lead to formation of other algae. So most probably there is nothing much I can do about it but to spray hydrogen peroxide on the surface and rinse the pots like this. Now, as I was saying, algae are not necessarily a bad sign, but let's anticipate a few of the comments that I will receive on this video. So you might say that this orchid is very overpotted, thus the medium stays moist too long and thus algae. Well, no, it's not the case with this orchid. I do talk about this in a different video, but not specifically made for this topic. So what happened was, this dendrobium orchid has a massive root system that did not die during transport. I personally believe dendrobium orchids hold on to their roots for years and years, unlike oncidiums and cattleyas. That's just my 2 cents. So I had two options. One, put the orchid in a big pot, which will eventually be okay for it in years and years, and I can actually keep the orchid like this for years and years because Seramis does not decompose, and also the older roots have less chances to die rather than a cattleya, oncidium, or other type of sympodial orchid. Why do people always call me when I film? Nobody calls me all day unless I film. Anyway, so where was I? Okay, so unlike other sympodials, this type of orchid, in my opinion, holds on to its roots. So I had an option to either pot it in a bigger pot that can accommodate all of the roots, which I actually did, or cut the root system of this orchid to make it fit in a smaller pot. and I opted, of course, to pot the orchid in a bigger pot. I also live in a very warm climate. This orchid dries up in 4 days, believe it or not. So for this reason, I do want to keep my medium moist most of the times, particularly because this orchid was in growing mode. She just matured this pseudobulb. So yes, the medium does stay more moist, and that helps algae. However, keeping it rather dry would not necessarily get me rid of algae and would not necessarily benefit my orchid. Now, the fact that I had algae on the bottom means that the orchid stays in a pool of water. And yes, it does stay in a pool of water because this is how I water it. It actually stays in that pool of water for 1 day. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can check the info card right here or the description below for a video on how I water my orchids. I'm okay with having a pool of water at the bottom because, again, I'm using clay medium, clay pots, and so on. So basically, it's fine. It's not a problem of over-watering, although algae might mean that your medium does stay moist all the time. However, in inorganics, that's really not such a big problem, and especially in bigger granulated Seramis coupled with a ceramic pot, not a problem, not an issue. So sorry for that, but I do feel the need sometimes to talk about this in my video because nobody actually reads the description, and you should always read the description because I kind of sometimes forget to say stuff in the video. I add them in the description. I add links, useful stuff, so it's always a good idea to check the description. But I feel many people don't usually check descriptions because people don't usually mention anything interesting in the description. I actually try to do so, or at least give more information. So this has been the update kinda on Seramis. I do have some algae issues on a few of my orchids, not many I have to say, but it's kind of easily fixable. If it's gonna be fixable in the long run, I don't think so. It might help if I would soak the entire pot in hydrogen peroxide, but hydrogen peroxide is scarce here. So we'll see how this does in the long run. I'm not scared of algae, I just don't want them to take over the pot. So alrighty guys, before I let you go, please take a moment to rate this video below with a like or a dislike. A share would be fabulous. These are the things that actually help my channel. Feel free to leave me comments down below if you have questions or suggestions for videos and topics. I always read my comments. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchid videos, and if you ever want to send me a letter, do so at the address you see on the screen or in the description below. You can choose an option on the screen to watch another orchid video or visit my website orchidnature.com. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye!